doing with this overall, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. And this was something that I really wanted to talk to you guys about, because I do think, as Kelsey is on our board, and I've said this to her from day one, I think people like you that are in this room are vitally important to this being successful. And what I mean by this being successful, I do not mean Personhood Iowa. I mean, we can call this tic-tac-toe, whatever you want to call it. What I mean is winning a culture of life in America once and for all. And one of the things I've always liked about the group of you that is assembled here, I almost went Ross Perot with you people. But one of the things I've always liked about you guys, even in areas where we don't agree, is you guys actually want to fight. And one of the things I've said to Joel and many of the Liberty people that I've been really good friends with from day one is that there's always been enough social conservatives to topple the Republican establishment, but we do not have what it takes to do it. Our people just want to be liked too much collectively. They were reared in access-based politics, and that was really the model of the old religious right, and that's going to take a generation to get us reared out of. And you guys don't have the numbers to topple the system, but you have the cojones to do it. And I always thought, you know, if we could somehow find mutual causes where we can merge your collective cojones with our collective numbers, then I think we could probably bring the system to its knees. Finding those kinds of issues when you have a Marxist in the White House becomes increasingly easier. Okay, but there's one issue that has been, I look around the room here and I see a lot of people my age and younger, and I'm 41 years old. I come from a 15-year-old mom who had me over at Iowa Lutheran Hospital at 11:59 a.m. July 28, 1973, 6 months after deciding, despite Roe versus Wade, that she was not going to abort me. And so if you're my age or younger, you are part of the first post-abortive generation in America, where we have friends that aren't here, that could have been here. We have neighbors and people that should have been a part of our era and our generation that aren't here. And it's not any coincidence that the same people that have been pushing this, really a culture of death, are the exact same people that are pushing all of the statism that all of us are opposed to. Because it's one comprehensive worldview. I've still yet to get a phone call from, in all my years of doing this, no one's ever called me up or ever sent me an email and said, Steve, give me Obamacare and save the babies. No one's ever called me and said that. No one's ever called me and said, hey, Steve, can I get government education and save the babies? No, there's a reason it's always one group against another, because what you're up against is a systematic theology, really, of Marxism. And this is one of their core tenets, and that is the child-killing industry. The opponents that you guys want to defeat on other issues, that you guys also place a priority on, understand that the number one fundraising mechanism they have is the child-killing industry. I'll give you some numbers. We kill about 4,000 kids a day in America. You do the math, times $500 a kill, multiply that by 365 days a year, and you want to know, why do they run candidates like Stacey Apple? Why do they run candidates like Wendy Davis in Texas? They know Wendy Davis is going to get beat by 20 points. They know that. Here's why. They take radical, pro-killing Democrat candidates, they run them in races they know they can't win because they can raise a whole lot of money off of those candidates in the places where they can, and then they shift that money to the races they can actually win. That's why they do that. If you look at the Clinton era, Bill Clinton betrayed every core constituency, the Democratic Party, homosexual lobbies, unions, betrayed them all, but one group he never, ever betrayed. And that is the child-killing industry. It is the number one funder of the American left, and it has been for an entire generation. And so, you know, I'm not a student of warfare, but I do know this. If you allow your enemy's infrastructure to remain in place, you cannot win. It doesn't matter how many bombs you drop on them. If their infrastructure remains in place, you cannot win. And so what we're forming in Personhood Iowa is an opportunity to once and for all take out the enemy's infrastructure. And the way that we want to do that is we want to beg a simple question. It is the question that Rick Warren asked Barack Obama, which was probably the most memorable question of the 2008 presidential election. And that question is, when is a child entitled to human rights? Or another way of putting it is, when is a person a person? Now, those of you that are fans of Ron and Rand Paul, you probably recognize that language because they have filed legislation in the past several years in the United States Congress using that exact same language. Now, why do we choose that language? Because if you go to the Roe versus Wade hearing in 1971 itself, you see a couple, in fact, you can watch this on YouTube. You can hear a couple of the Supreme Court justices question the attorney from NARAL the National Abortion Rights Action League, and they specifically asked her this question: if it could be determined that a child in the womb, or that a fetus in the womb was a person, what would that do to your case? And she laughs nervously and she says, really, the whole case would fall apart at that point. And then the follow-up question from one of the other justices is, what about individual states? What if an individual state decided that for the sake of state law, that the unborn fetus is a person? Could they do that? And she admitted on the record, yeah, absolutely they could do that. And so one of the things, for example, Kim Pearson and I did the 2 years she was in the legislature, is her and I literally wrote the legislation, the personhood legislation that happened in Iowa, including the one where we forced the vote on the Iowa House floor because the Republicans wouldn't give it to us. And it ends with the phrase, there will be no judicial review of this legislation. Why? Because both ours and the federal Constitution allows us to limit the scope and jurisdiction of the courts. Now, this is a new paradigm. Those of us that have grown up in the pro-life movement, or if you're a little bit older, the strategy has always been in the past to try to incrementally regulate this out of business. Now, overall, that has been a successful strategy in that we have fewer child-killing abortuaries than we've ever had before. However, we're no closer to overturning Roe than we were the day after, because we're not begging the necessary question. And that question is this: when is a person a person? And that's the question we want to beg in all of the public policy we stand for. And we think that we really have to take this out of the partisan political sphere, that too many Republicans have used this, like NASCAR drivers put decals on their uniforms. Well, you know, this pro-life group says I'm pro-life, even though I have no idea what in the Sam Hill that means, and I couldn't possibly defend it, and I collapse at the first time that I'm confronted with it. We think that actually we're going to have to do this as a grassroots movement outside of the partisan political process. We have given the two-party system 40 years to figure out killing innocent little babies is bad, and they haven't gotten that one yet. And so I think we're going to have to do this on our own. And I think that if we could find enough common ground, given the methodology, and I think the methodology of how we want to do this will appeal to you, because we think the way to beg this question is to have as many individual states as possible put into their code that a person is a person from the moment of conception without exceptions, and thus essentially raise enough of a stink that the U.S. Supreme Court, everybody says, well, we can't end abortion until we overturn Roe. Well, if you want to overturn Roe, you have to beg a question that demands the court to reconsider. And the only question that will demand it reconsidering it is what? Hey, we're killing people, we can't do that. And so that's what we want to do. It's a challenge to the system. I will be brutally honest with you, like I always am, whether you like it or not. Sometimes I don't like it because it means I have less friends, okay? But the truth is I've got many people in my own social conservative ranks who don't like this strategy, who are concerned if we take this to the court, well, then they'll undo everything else that we have already accomplished. To me, I think it's a little bit like the slavery issue. We tried to incrementally regulate this little by little by little, and then when we took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, the court still looked at Dred Scott and said, that is not a person, that is a piece of property. So we want to amass a grassroots army in order to beg the question here in the state of Iowa, when is a person a person? Because I can promise you this, having done political activism for numerous campaigns from president to dog catcher all over the country, the issue of life is not a litmus test. It's more fundamental than that. It is a window to the soul. I can promise you, I have never ever met a candidate that was weak on life, that was good on anything else that you guys care about. And that if they can't read the Fifth Amendment, that no person shall be denied life or property without due process of law, they won't protect any of those other Bill of Rights either. This is a fundamental issue. So we have Tim here. If Tim, you'll raise your hand, please. Tim's our executive director. When we're done here, if you guys want to get together with either him or I, and if you're interested in getting involved as volunteers in your individual communities, churches, counties, we really want to build this from the grassroots up. And I think what you guys have done here as a movement is absolutely tremendous, because you have made all of the right people nervous, and you've done it. You've done it because it's just like in real estate. Right, it's location, location, location. In grassroots politics, and I know there's several of you that I'm sure learned this from Morton Blackwell, the Leadership Institute. It's organize, organize, organize. And you guys have organized the system to death. You made a governor spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of his own money out of his campaign to eradicate you from the system. Take that as a tremendous compliment. Okay? And so what I'm hoping we can do is harness some of that energy Not everybody's going to be able to work for a presidential campaign or a gubernatorial campaign. Sometimes the music stops playing and you don't have a chair to sit in. So if you want some place where you can channel that activism and that energy, we hope that maybe we can provide you that kind of an alternative. So, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, does